right. Well, hello, this is Matt Orozco from Macabre Daily. I'm really excited to bring a lot of folks back together, all of whom I think I've talked to individually for their own films, but in a special celebration of upcoming, or what, by the time this is released, Canada Day. So the whole point of putting this together was, you know, when we think about North America particularly, the conversation gets extremely dominated by the US, whether that's even by design or not. Even when a film may have been made somewhere else, we always attribute a lot of that to the United States. And that utterly does an underservice to not only Canada, but also Mexico in regards to the great quality of films that are coming out. And so given that we've had some amazing conversations for your respective films, interviews we've done before, I wanted to bring you all back together to have a conversation so we can shine a much brighter light on the Canadian horror scene and really unpack some of the things that maybe folks aren't aware of that really like horror but want to know more about how they can support the scene, but also maybe find some hidden gems. I don't know about you all, but I definitely have binged quite a bit of Canadian horror, and some surprises came across about things I didn't know were made in Canada, things that I knew were, but didn't realize how much. And one of my favorite movies on my t-shirt here, not only does it take place in Canada, but I believe a good chunk of it was filmed in Calgary. So with that, I want to have everyone do an introduction. So I'm going to start with Robert, and then we'll go to Susie, and then we'll go to James and Kelly.
Okay, hi. I'm Robert Cuffley. I'm a director, composer. I used to screenwrite until I met Susie, who's better at it than me. So I said, I gave her the responsibility of doing it, which is a very sweet feeling, not having to do it anymore because she's much better at it. I'm in Western Canada, and yeah, I love horror. I could talk about it for hours.
Thank you, Robert.
I'm Susie Maloney. I started my career as a novelist. I've written 5 horror novels, and now I write horror screenplays. I love it because you can do 2 a year. Not easy to do 2 books a year. It is steaming hot in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada today. It's 34, which for our American people is about 95, I think. So it's really, really hot here. Robert and I did my first horror feature, Bright Hill Road, and it was released in January, and it is currently available now for streaming on Prime.
Thank you, Susie. Yeah. And over to you, James and Kelly.
James and Kelly, recent watchers of Bright Hill Road on Prime streaming. It is also 30 degrees in Montreal, so hot. Heat warning when I opened up my weather app to double check it. I'm very excited to talk about horror movies. We recently made the film The Death Trip, which you can watch anywhere in North America where you have to pay for it, yes. and soon all around the world later this year. It's getting distribution.
Awesome. Yes. So that's James, who's the director / co-writer of Death Trip. I'm Kelly, the co-writer, technically producer, and one of the leads of Death Trip, the movie.
Cool. Awesome.
Very exciting.
Yes, and big support for both Bright Hill Road and Death Trip. To everyone watching this, when we post this, please do what you can to go support those films. Not only are they really well made and really extremely innovative in their own rights, but you're supporting independent filmmaking, which I think is the one thing that brings everyone to the film scene, no matter how they come to it. Is, you know, you start to learn that you can't just go make a big movie. And in fact, some of the best movies are the ones that didn't start out with the intention of being big. So I don't want to drone on too much because that's kind of my forte in these situations, but I really want to get to getting a big conversation going. And as I mentioned in the introduction, the whole point of this conversation is really to start to unpack Canadian horror in a much broader way, and talking to people that not only are living and from Canada, but also are part of contributing to that scene. You know, I think candidly, when we think about horror generally in Canada, you know, there's a few films that come to mind. You know, I think My Bloody Valentine is one that seems to pop up quite often. Most recently, The Void, you know, which I think a lot of folks wouldn't, you know, again, you don't always know a film's made where it's made, but at the same time, that's going to lead us into our first question, which is, when you think about horror, there is a certain level of regionality to where it's made. You know, the Italians, for example, I think you can pretty much within 5 minutes of watching an Italian horror movie, you kind of know that it's Italian, either made or it was produced there, because it just has a vibe. Similar with Spanish horror, a German horror to some extent. So from your all's perspective, what do you think makes Canadian horror different or unique based on its regionality? And how might that be different from other parts of the world? So we'll start, James and Kelly, with you.
Great question. We both have our opinions on it, or our like theories, and I think a lot of it stems from just kind of an identity crisis in general. We were talking about comedy stuff the other day, and I was like, that kind of applies to horror too. I think that we're really informed by like British sensibilities, which are more kind of like buttoned up and repressed. So I think we really get a kick out of going the polar opposites, like body horror, seeing things just like literally your emotions like exploding out of your body, like really like a physical manifestation of all of this repressed like garbage we have inside of us. I think that's something we're drawn to, and I think that is present in a lot of Canadian horror. Maybe just more mainstream stuff. I don't know, but that's my first hot take. I don't know how everyone else feels about it.
I think that Bright Hill Road is the perfect movie to talk about in this context. Because I don't know, okay, so I read this book like years ago. They Came From Within. It's like the Canadian horror book. And in that book, I'm never going to pronounce the author's name right. I've tried so many times, like Callum Battsdow. Anyways. But no, in that book, the main thing about what like Canadiana is like, there's the three things, which is one is what Kelly said, which is insecurity. Was that identity?
I say like repression, insecure. It's a little bit of everything. I think just the British influence of being like prudish in certain ways.
That's the comedy's the easiest actually way to understand it, because if you think of like American comedy, it's traditionally very like blue collar, like let's laugh at the trucker or whatever, and then British comedy is like we're laughing at the banker, and then Canadian comedy you get this weird thing where it's like Kids in the Hall or SCTV, it's like very middle class, like we're laughing at the suburban family. But for the three big things are like weather and isolation. Bright Hill Road has that oppressive Calgary vibe of just like, I don't know, there's the wheat everywhere, or the fields. Identity crisis stuff, which is kind of what she's saying, because there is, and then insecurity, which is just like we wish we were, even if we don't wish we were American, which whatever, no, either way. But there is a thing of just like
safe space.
We're in the Commonwealth and we grow up looking at America, so we have this weird thing where it's like, who are we? Yeah, we don't know.
It's like we have an inferiority complex in terms of like our relationship with America, but also like a superiority complex in a weird way. Which I don't know if that impacts anything at all, but like, we're so much better than them, but we wish we could be them so desperately.
It's a horrible, the worst personality trait of like someone you want to meet at a party. It's like some people don't talk about with Canadians enough. It's just like this righteous indignation of like, okay, so a big thing is at Dollarama, which is a chain. A couple like last year or 2 years ago, there was there was like the Make America, the MAGA hats in the States. They had like in Canada, they had ones that are printed with the same font that said like Canada is already great. Super weird, passive aggressive, gross item to sell at all the dollar in. This is like when I bought. We can cut this out. I bought one. I'm a huge fan of memorabilia. I bought one because I thought it was really gross, and I guess I did not support it negatively by paying money for it. That being said, Canada's weird, and I feel like it's like the thing of like, this is a myth, I think, but I've always heard that golden retrievers are like the most friendly dogs, and that there is like golden retrievers with a snap. That's like a scary thing about them. I don't know how true this is, but I like to believe it's true because it's like the perfect analogy for when I think of like Canadian horror. It's just like the Canada nice. It's like, Fargo is a similar, the horror and the comedy of Fargo is very similar. So I'm sorry, I'm talking so long. This is my answer.
This is all good. Let it flow. And I can confirm that golden retrievers, when they are mad, look absolutely different than they do when they're not mad. So they can be quite terrifying. My mom has had a few, and they haven't all been nice. So Susie, what about you? I'm not going to get heavy
here, but I do have this feeling that lately Canada's mask has been slipping just a bit, and Canada the nice is not quite the truth that we all want it to be. We're a lot more American than we think. But yeah, Canadian horror, I totally agree with the isolation weather. The horror comes from outside, because this is very true. We live in a place where the outdoors can kill us, whether it's through weather, in the winter, or through wildlife. If you just think about the number of grizzly movies shot here, including the absolutely fabulous Backcountry. Has anybody seen it?
No.
Oh, I love that movie. It's on Prime.
You have to like start a list. I don't know. This is gonna be a struggle.
But absolutely fantastic film. It's, you know, it's remotely about a grizzly bear, but it's about survival in the wild. And I would call it a horror movie. Robert's my arbiter. Would you call it a horror movie, Robert?
Yeah, there's so many subgenres of horror. Yeah, I would say so. It's pretty terrifying.
It's a monster movie, really,
It's
right?
relentless. It's relentless. Yeah.
Exactly. And Grizzly, literally called Grizzly, which they are apparently finally 40 years later doing a sequel.
Oh.
Feel like they missed
Just released it.
Did they?
Yeah, I think it's been like I think they had it in shelved for a while, and then they finally just put it out, or they're about to put it out.
Yeah, they're putting it out this summer, I think. I'm waiting.
Yeah.
I've been waiting 40 years. I loved that movie.
You're not alone, Susie.
It's such a good one. But you know, you think of even like something like Pontypool, or you know, our version of the zombie genre, Pontypool and the fabulous Blood Quantum from last year. You know, those are the horrors that again come from outside. Pontypool all takes place more or less inside a radio station out in the middle of nowhere that is under zombie attack. Right there, I ruined it for everybody.
Oh, spoiler alert
My
on
dad just got
Pontypool,
this
you
on
guys.
DVD for Father's Day.
Such a good
If
movie.
you haven't seen Pontypool by now, though,
I suppose, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so fuck you if you haven't seen it by now.
like
Oh, sorry, I'm
Shots fired at my dad.
Out of
You hear that,
control.
Jim Hercom? This is directed to you.
I'm so red now.
From Susie Maloney's lips to your ears.
Maybe he's seen it before. And he
No. So yeah, so I do. I think it comes, I think, you know, a lot of our horror comes from outside of our safe places, our homes, our workplace. Take it away, Robert.
Yeah, no, I agree with everyone, actually. The landscape, especially, it's in Bright Hill Road, it's all over. But also to your movie, which I watched last night, there's stills in there. Like, I remember starting out and people were like, don't shoot in the winter. Can you just avoid the snow? It's going to affect your sales. I'm like, okay, who's done a study about that, first of all? It said there's a reason stuff shot in, you know, California, Palm Springs always succeeds because it's happy and that's how people want to feel, but that's not our reality. So there's that. But I think a lot of our identity comes from seeing seeing people in the States and saying, like, even our funding body, Telefilm, and I'm not sure who's had Telefilm funding, but they make a point. They don't want to fund something that Americans would want to make. So, or so they say.
Nice.
And they've been very good to me, so I'm not slagging them. But I don't know. It's sometimes when someone's got, I don't want to say a gun to your head, but when someone's saying, okay, go do your story, but damn it, make it Canadian. Like, I don't know what to do with that information. I was a screenwriter, I'm a director. Does that not make it Canadian? You know what I mean? Or do I have to have some not so subtle, digs at America? Like, what do I do? I don't know. So, but I would say there's this book I've never read. I've just heard of the title called Weird Sex and Snowshoes by Catherine Monk, who used to work at the Vancouver Sun. I'm not sure, but she's a film critic, really nice lady. And it's just all about how what we put out is much almost in a response to what comes out of America, because some of us don't want to be that. And then the people that want to be that realize we can't for one reason, and that's because your budget's like this, our budget's like this. So like a big Canadian film, and The Witch is not a Canadian film.
Yeah.
Just because I Googled it, Canadian films, and there's all these films that aren't Canadian in there. I worked with the colorist of The Witch. It was shot in Ontario. Some of the producers were surely from Ontario, but it's not a Canadian movie. So I don't know. I just wanted to blather longer than you, Matt, and I've done so.
I'm very excited that you brought up that specifically for some reason. I was like, yes, The Witch, please.
Yeah.
These co-production
Yeah,
should never
it's not
count.
Canadian. I heart that movie so much. But it's not Canadian.
But there's that distinction, right? What makes it Canadian? Just because it was shot here does not make it a Canadian film.
No.
And so many films that are considered by our neighbors down there, our downstairs neighbors to be Canadian when they're not. Just like I was trying to decide the other day if we have this fantastic zombie series. There I am on about the zombies again, but called Black Summer. Is anybody watching it?
Heard of it. It's on my to watch list.
It's really fantastic. The first season I think was slightly better, but it's a good season. But you recognize every actor on there because it's all shot in and around Calgary. Oh. And so you know all the actors, most of them. It's written and produced by the people who did Z Nation, and it's kind of like a prequel to Z Nation, but not funny at all.
You mean Z Nation, don't you?
Oh, sorry.
No,
It's not Canadian. I can say Z Nation.
That was a low blow. Low blow.
No, well, this is Matt. Early when you were talking about like, there's movies I didn't even realize.
Oh, they're frozen.
Oh, that's okay. This is the.
Oh,
there you are.
Oh, did I freeze?
Yeah.
Just for a second. Yes, just for a second.
My gosh, this is. Oh no! It says our internet connection's unstable. Don't know what that's about, but it's not about Canada. No, I was gonna say when you said earlier, like Nightbreeder, you were talking about these movies that you didn't realize were Canadian. To me, it's like impossible to watch a Canadian-made movie and not be able to tell. It's like the weirdest thing. But even like, I don't know. That's the weird thing I think about David Cronenberg being such a successful American director and why Canadian, or at least I am very. It's like you watch like Maps of the Stars or something, his like super LA movie, and it still feels super Canadian to me, and I can't tell.
That with like low budge.
I know that's the other self-loathing truth about Canada.
I'm like, yeah, what's this Canadian? Like, I thought Arrested Development weirdly was Canadian because it was like
because of its humor.
Camera. I don't know, just the quality of it. I'm like, I don't know about this.
Well, we can get into it, but
like a kid,
the Canadian Broadcasting Act is really weird, and the reason why there's so many weird Canadian things that get made is just the percentage. So Canadians have this weird chip on their shoulder where they're like automatically judging their own product because they feel like the government is forcing them to make them. It's
so
interesting. Horrible spiral.
It's interesting because I think one of the things I noticed when I was doing, a bit of research and I was trying to watch a bunch of Canadian horror films that I didn't know about, like not ones that like, oh, I think that's Canadian. It's like I was looking for ones, and it's good you brought up what makes a Canadian horror film, because I came to the same conclusion that just because it's made in Canada does not necessarily mean it's a Canadian horror film. Really, I looked at it more from the perspective of, is the core group of filmmakers that made this Canadian? And does it feel, and this is going to sound weird because it's so amorphous to define, but does it feel Canadian? Because I think there is something to this, there's almost an anonymity to the location on films that are in like you all see it as you see it because you're familiar with it, but in the United States, to us there's very little bit of like we know a film shot in Vegas because it's got Las Vegas, right? They make it a point to call out what city or what location in the U.S. a film happens to be in, because that's, for whatever reason, there seems to be an importance to that. I don't think that's always true. But at the same time, they're almost make it a point to say, this is Phoenix, Arizona. Okay, I know Phoenix, Arizona is oppressively hot. That's all I need to know. But in Canadian horror films, they never really seem to go out of their way to say, oh, this is Calgary or this is Vancouver, and parts of Canada are very different. So I think that level of diversity across the landscape isn't always reflected, but in the same way that almost barren, kind of isolating feel, the cold weather, the cynicism and just the overall look at life, but also that kind of humor, that dark humor that goes with it as well, I think is very uniquely Canadian. And I think that's what I picked up on, is like, does this film feel like it was made by someone who understands Canada, either because they are Canadian or because they've lived in Canada for so long that they have the sensibilities in how they make film?
I wouldn't mind addressing that. When I was writing novels, I was told not to set anything in Canada. I was writing big books, like, that sold everywhere. And I was told not to set them in Canada because Americans, the largest market, didn't understand Canada at all and didn't know where anything was. Yeah. And so it was off-putting for them. And so a lot of Canadian books, certainly of that time when I was writing them, have these sort of generic locations, oh, it's a small town, oh, it's a small city. And I think we do have this feeling that if you set something in Edmonton, people are going to go, where? But if you set something in a small city, everybody gets that. It could be Pittsburgh, right? Well, it doesn't look like Pittsburgh at all, I'll tell you. But
Well,
yeah,
the
so I
Wrong
think
Turn films. Like, have
What's
you seen the most? Have you seen the most recent Wrong Turn film? It was kind of like a reboot of the.
No.
I love Wrong Turn.
Yeah, well, the original one I love. It's the best Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake or kind of homage. That's one of the better ones. But they rebooted Wrong Turn, and I think they released at the beginning of this year, and it was made. I believe it was a Canadian production. I don't know if it was entirely Canadian, so I don't think I included it on my list, but it was definitely shot in Canada, and you can tell like there's a very distinct look to the wilderness there. And it's a terrifying look because, I don't know the exact percentage, but there's a big chunk of Canada that isn't really inhabited by a lot of people. So, it's kind of the perfect landscape for this, but at the same time, it maintains a sense of anonymity that I think makes it even more mysterious. But at the same time, to your point, Susie, why aren't we getting more familiar with Nova Scotia? Why aren't we doing things that help us understand the differences between Toronto and Vancouver, which could not be more different from one another? But at the same time, if you say that to someone who's relatively unaware of the geography, they're like, "Oh, it's Canada, right?" Like that it doesn't do service to the parts of the world it is, nor the uniqueness of there's a rich history in a lot of Canada, and depending on what part you're in. But when you think, go ahead, Kelly. Go ahead.
Jesus,
Go ahead.
Matt.
I know maybe people are not supposed to admit to doing this, but I was listening to some podcast, an American podcast, review our movie for like an hour and a half, which is like brutal.
Wow.
But they're like, okay, so these people, they're in the country, okay, I see, and they're from Montreal, and then someone says, from the big city, like, is there a big city in Montreal? I was like, you're killing me, like, yeah, of course. It's like, I don't know, it's Montreal, it doesn't have a certain cachet. Don't people like
Montreal, Grand Prix.
Yeah, like Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, like they're big.
Well,
cities.
Toronto has Drake now.
Well, yeah, Toronto
so
has Drake,
fine.
so they're fine. But I just thought that was really interesting. Where I was like, wow, they really have no idea.
Yeah,
a lot of Americans.
So weird. One of the questions that we're talking about, like what Canadian movie, and like I'm trying to think of like if we were influenced to be like make a Canadian specific movie or whatever, and it was like we really didn't. And then when we watched it, we were like, Jesus Christ, this is so Canadian. It's like made by the like Canadian Cultural Heritage Foundation or something. And there was just like weird things where it's like there's one of the characters who's like from Halifax who lives in Montreal is making fun of someone from Vancouver. And like to us, that's like a very clear thing. And we're like, oh, like I realize now, like when you watch it through someone else's eyes, like Jesus Christ, or the idea of like Montrealers going to like rural Ontario.
Yeah,
there is a threat, but it's not the threat of like these people hate people from the country. It's just like people thinking that they're snob. It's just like a weird. The distinctions are very subtle, but we just I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's in that's what I mean. Like it's in Canadian movies, but it's not. I don't know. It's weird.
Like they'd understand like a New Yorker going to like
a New Yorker going to, or like, like my cousin Vinny. No one's like, why is he different from the people in that town?
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Get it.
Yeah.
He's from Queens or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Like we even know like down to the borough, the like intricacies and like specifics of a personality type. Whereas you're like, I don't know. Canada's a place. The end. It's all the same.
I know. We were really proud. They're like, oh, we're setting our characters up in the mile end of Montreal. That's going to say a lot. And we're like, what are we?
I mean, that's maybe like too niche, but
I think we just need subtitles explaining this.
Yeah,
Mile End. Come with a pamphlet, maybe, or a program.
Yeah, it's like 2016
video
neighborhood in Canada, no longer relevant in 2021 or whatever. I don't know, something stupid like this.
And I don't want to take the U.S. defense at all, but I think what is interesting is that when we think about the middle of the U.S., it's always considered to be, it's just that's the. I don't think of a better word than podunk because that's the first like kind of word that comes up, and it's like that's the rural, I guess is the best way to describe it. But like they consider rural and city, so there's always that dichotomy between the city and the rurality of something. But we inherently know that because we know New York's a city. We know Albany is a city as well, but it's not as much of a city. Like the Poconos, we know that those are forests. We know that Texas is just a big desert that people shoot guns at. It's. But it also has like it's near a beach. People don't know it's near a body of water as well. I guess if you look at a map, you know. But anyway, the point is like we do classify like parts of the U.S. in certain ways, but there is that unwillingness or unwantingness to know. I think in the U.S. side to just not really take an interest of like why is that different there. And the hope is that as film continues to be more unique and individualized, that it starts to retain some of that personality in a regional sense. And we start to become familiar with, there's a rich indigenous history in both of our countries. And I know that there's been some pretty awful things that have just been unearthed, in Canada. And we're not going to go too far down this hole, but I will say that at least you all are doing something to uncover this, right? Like our history is significantly more, I want to say more bloody, but I'm pretty sure if I was a betting man that we would probably take the cake when it comes to, indigenous slaughter. But it's
if you watch like the Revenant, and then there's like the Americans, and then there's like the Frere Jacques, and they're all killing people. It's all bad. All of us are bad. It's very really is a toss up.
Like just also
it's a white person thing, I believe.
Yes.
Yes. And so I think there's this rich history that, to a sense, like there's an acknowledgement of that history. And I think in the US, we have a bit of an identity crisis because we're largely a, immigrant nation. We're not a lot of people are can say they're born here. Like that would be an indigenous person, would be of indigenous heritage. So I think the identity crisis plays a role in our filmmaking, but at the same time, it is uniquely American in its own right. And when you think about like your influences, obviously the isolation, kind of that sense of humor that around, being able to poke fun at the not so much trying to go the British sensibilities or the lowest common denominator, like the American humor, kind of that middle ground. What are some of those influences that you all kind of took into consideration as filmmakers? Think about how do I, with you given the direction, Robert, like make this film Canadian, what is it you think about? What influences you to try and infer that or in through your filmmaking?
Tell me if I go too far off the track, but to me, what interests me in film, so as I get older, I have less interest in blockbusters, which pains me to say, because that used to be, when I was my daughter's age, that used to be everything for me. And those films are still big in my life, but now my interest in filmmaking is all about how different people do things. Like everyone shot a car chase, everyone shot a fight scene, everyone shot, making love scene, but how do different, like what just popped in my head is David Lynch, who's Canadian. No, just kidding, he's not. But I just wanted to claim him as our own
American filmmaker.
but his use of subliminal sound, for instance, it interests me, and I go and I look at the way he executes certain sequences that have symmetry with all of his films. So that's kind of, if I'm understanding your question, that's what gets my juice going, is not so much the stories, but how different people tell them.
I like that. Because there is, I think, I forget the exact line, but there's like 7, major story plot lines that exist. And like we're all basically riffing on those when we create our stories. But at the same time, it's like, you can watch samurai westerns and The Mandalorian are a great example. You can watch Yojimbo and watch an episode of The Mandalorian and get 2 completely different experiences with the exact same plot. There's so much of that, and I think that it is down to the execution. Susie, when you think about writing, like what are is there anything influencing you that's uniquely Canadian, or anything that you kind of observe that goes into your writing or the filmmaking?
I come back again, and I've lived I know a lot of places in Canada, and I've lived in great big cities like Toronto, and I've lived in we lived in a small town that literally had 10 houses. So I really have had the Canadian experience. I've spent some time in Montreal. I've been lots of time on the West Coast, lots of time in Ontario. I lived in Ontario for 10 years. And I was born and raised on the prairies in Manitoba. So I find myself with these kind of 2 sensibilities. Like Canadians, we have 2 sensibilities. What did we used to call it in the 90s? The 2 solitudes.
The 2 solitudes.
2 solitudes. And one idea is being alone in the country. You are really alone. There's before the cell phones, for instance. If a storm wiped out your power, there was no way to know when that would be coming back in. And so you have these tools that, you have generators and flashlights and, a wood stove. These things are part of your survival. And the other part is being in a great big city where there's an anonymity that can be lonely and scary, And so I think that depending on the story I'm telling, those are the two places I come from. One of the things that I liked doing in Bright Hill Road that I've done again in a different way in Romy is taking a fish out of water. Obviously, I've forgotten her name. Who's in Bright Hill Road? Siobhan's character.
Marcy.
Character name. I forgot. Marcy. Oh my gosh. Anyway, but Marcy is a fish out of water. She's, come from the big city and she's now trapped in this scary country, hotel. And she can't get away. And, that is part of the thing about being in the country. If you run out of gas or your phone doesn't work or you've lost that power, you could be trapped there for a long time. And being trapped is something that happens here. We lived for a long time on Manitoulin Island, which is the largest freshwater island in North America. And we had, so it was an island connected to the mainland with like literally one wire was our joke, but we were connected by very few wires because it's a tiny island. It was, 10,000 population. And the ice storms, do you guys remember the ice storms that we had in,
Yes.
in the 90s? Remember that? It wiped out our power to the island. And so there was no power anywhere. Everybody kind of chipped in and helped and did all those things, but that's scary, and that's in a big town of 1,300 where we had no power. And it went on for days, if you guys remember that.
Yes, I watched at the very beginning of this whole COVID thing. I don't know if you guys remember. There was the first couple weeks I was just watching so many CBC reports on the ice storm. Like, when have I been through anything like this in my life?
You had to skip school.
And I was like, yes, we didn't go to school. Everything was broken. There was ice everywhere. It was horrible. But it's weird.
It was scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what you're saying is the thing of like Canada, like big city country, whatever. But also I think the proximity is weird.
Yes.
Like that movie, like Rabbit. Easy boy. No, Rabbit's a good example. If you watch that movie, it's like all in Montreal and right outside of Montreal. But like where she's at the hospital looks like the woods in the middle of nowhere, like the last stop. And then like literally like a motorcycle ride during Montreal. It's like a very
Was that
yes,
the remake?
right.
Was that the remake?
Not the remake, the Cronenberg, the 80s, the 70s. The remake I haven't seen. I'm another
No, neither have I.
filmmaking
I
luminaries.
want to see the remake of that movie.
Bad news? Bad movie?
No, it's not bad. It's just some things don't need to be remade, and I think,
Yes.
there's and I don't want to take anything away from the Soska sisters on that, on that film necessarily as much as I want it, because they're also Canadian, so
I liked American Mary by the Canadian.
that movie terrified me. My now wife was in medical school, and I saw American Mary when she first started medical school, and I don't think I've ever told her that actually, so I might tell her that story. But like, I thought that movie scared the shit out of me because
It's like, babe, can you leave the tools at home at the school, maybe like after class?
oh, not even that. I was just worried that like that would happen to her. Like that's the last thing I want to have happen. It's like I wasn't worried so much about me and my safety, but more just like, wow, that's the kind of thing that could happen because unfortunately we live in a day and age where sexual assault is despite how aware we are of it, it still happens quite regularly. And so I think that but to the Rabid remake, it's fine. But again, it's their telling of this story. But at the same time, not every story needs to be retold. You could say the same about the Death Wish remake. No one needs to remake Bronson's. Was it a bad movie? Oh, it's fine. Eli Roth did an okay job. But like at the same time, he's not. As to Robert's point earlier, this story's been told. And it's not being told that differently. So what are we? In what service is it to?
Right.
Yeah, like I heard Spielberg's right now trying to keep a remake from Jaws happening, and if he decides not to do it, I will take the mantle. And somehow,
Also, director of West Side Story.
yeah,
Round
Yeah,
two,
true,
being like,
true.
guys, stop remaking these Jaws movies.
That's very good. That's a good point. But still,
That's
Jaws, come on.
I mean, yeah,
Take
I don't
it.
understand. I mean, it's just shark. There's so many great shark movies. Just make another great shark movie. What was
Sharknado.
that one? Sharknado.
Yeah,
The one with Blake
Sensation.
Lively that was
Oh, The Shallows.
The Shallows. That was a good movie.
I mean, they tried with I think the Meg was them dipping their toes in the water, saying,
Yes.
"Can we make a bigger shark movie, though? And like, can
How
we
big
cast the
is-
smallest actor possible in it? Yes, we can, and yes, we
Well,
did."
Can I weave this into a point, because I think this is part of what makes us. So Spielberg, as I'm sure everyone knows, lucked into some technical difficulties, resulted in probably what made the movie so fantastic, which is the shark not fucking working ever, right?
Nope.
And so that's like developed my entire way I see things, which is the monster that you don't see is the scariest monster of all. And so I would link this to Canadians, because everyone knows that Shalamala Ding Dong movie, whatever, Signs, which was great until a very specific moment when they showed the creature full body. And I was like, check, please. You know, I just wasn't interested in that point. But as Canadians, and this is with your film, this is with Bright Hill, like, we can't always show the stuff that people are preconditioned to see, even though when you don't show it, the emotional, visceral terror, if handled properly, is huge, much bigger than if you spent 3 weeks doing, I don't care if it's, post VFX or, in camera effects or what, but it's just sometimes more effective to not see things. So I think as Canadians, like with Bright Hill Road, there was not a lot of crazy makeup. And what we did in post was just augment what was there. But I can't imagine going much further than that, because I really like I showed my wife When a Stranger Calls the other night, and the original. Shit, that's got a remake too. I've never seen it. But
Me neither.
You probably never, you hardly ever see like the killer, the whole, I'm not going to spoil anything, but in the opening 12 minutes before that, zoom into Charles Durning, which is so awesome. I love that guy.
He's scary.
Never even see the guy. You just hear his voice, and that interests me to no end, because your mind starts painting a picture, and the picture your mind paints is better than any special effects technician could imagine.
And James, you did that so beautifully in Death Trip with that opening sequence with the blood.
Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, because I have an aversion, oddly, to photos. Whenever I do like to listen to the odd true crime, podcast or something, but I don't want to ever Google those stories because I'm afraid that I'll see the crime scene. So that scared me so much, seeing all that blood. And may I point out, I don't know who does your work, but your blood work was on point. It was very real looking.
Very
So-
happy about that.
Our little
I don't know who does your blood work, but
It's a combination of various Quaker Oats recipe. And I'm just trying to think.
It was literally like Nestle.
It was like
Nestle
we had good, nice blood, and then we eventually just made
Yeah.
chocolate and strawberry maple,
syrup.
like just
Really?
like a tub full, and
Yeah.
it looked so much better. I don't know
It
why.
smells disgusting. At a certain point, well, fun fact, I guess. I don't know if I can spoil anything. Whatever. There's a very bloody scene towards the end, and everyone's like gathered in the room together, and you can see Garrett literally like retching, and that's from the smell of that stuff. We all like had it in
Very
our like
sweet.
mouth. It was really gross. Never again. But I'm glad it looked good, because then
it did look
yes
it
again.
looked very scary beginning, man. It's a great movie, but that set me up perfectly.
Well, I know what you mean, like in terms of withholding the thing, because it's like, in general, I find horror and comedy are very similar, because it's like expectations, it's audience based, it's like whatever. There's like a million reasons, but also I find them both funny in a similar way. And expectations in horror is like the most I get giggly, is the thing to be like, oh my god, oh
Yeah.
no. And then horror movies that can sustain that the whole time is like the best treat of all time. And then, like Rob was saying with Signs, when it doesn't happen, it's like someone saying a really like
Yeah.
offensive punchline or like a horrible punchline or something, and
Get
you're just
off
like,
the
oh,
stage.
come on.
Yeah.
We're sitting through all this and now this happened.
Because you really wanted to rewatch Signs recently, and I was
I
like,
really want to
don't wanna
rewatch
watch
Signs. I know,
and
because
don't
I remember,
Yeah, don't
I remember
rewatch
the
it.
greatest thing in Signs was the.
I know what you're going to say.
Well, please tell me. No, it was never the. It was never when you saw the alien. It was
Yeah,
always
very
like
fun.
there's a TV reflection, a tube
That's it.
television reflection. You can't do that scare anymore, and my heart is broken. The
Yeah,
tube
it was
TVs
so
don't
good.
exist for that reason.
And
So
just, before I turn it over, as Canadians, we should at one point apologize. So I will apologize for
Sorry.
that Shalamala Ding Dong joke. I'm sure he's a really nice guy. He's nice to animals. He's made some good films. I like that one, The Devil, or maybe it's just Devil. I think that was
This
Shalamala.
is
Devil.
the we've
Yeah.
been talking about rewatching
Yeah.
that. I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
So
no, it's
this
good, right,
older
Susie?
movie?
Yeah, it's a really good. I love that movie.
Long time ago, but he's
Come on,
he's-
Sixth Sense. It's a
Sixth
classic.
Sense.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Incredible.
I mean,
Scariest
after
movie
that.
I saw as a child, for sure. One of them.
He also goes by Knight, which I always thought was funny. This is like a
Oh.
side note. I've been obsessed with the fact, like, if you meet him, what do you call him? And everyone's like, call him Knight. I don't know why. I just thought that's funny. I don't.
That's the
I'd love to
coolest
meet him
thing.
one day.
And yeah, that's
Hey,
the coolest thing you could earn. Like if anyone said just call him Knight, then I think you can just pack it up at that point. Like you have reached the peak of human existence. Like just like our, like Seal or Cher or the other, Madonna, like the single name people, you have now become synonymous with just one word.
Yeah.
I'm going to move around some of these questions here because I think the conversation we're having is really interesting, and I want to keep it around like things that are going to keep that going. But when it comes to Canadian horror films and filmmakers, what are some ones that you want to call some attention to? Now, obviously, the folks on this call everyone should be following and taking a look at and seeing out all of what they've done and what they will continue to do, because there's so much time left for them to do it. But I want to try and avoid, the mainstays of Cronenberg, right? Because I think when people think of Canadian horror, that is the first name that comes up. And Cronenberg's amazing. His son put out a fantastic film as
What about
well.
Brandon? Yeah.
Yeah,
That's one of
but
my
I think
favorites
that.
last year. It's so good.
But it's like saying all American movies are Spielberg movies. It's almost doing a disservice to the fact that there are so many amazing filmmakers. I mean, Bob Clark, arguably created the first slasher. I'm not even arguably. I'll just say he did. Like
This is a great thing that I want to take ownership of now. Just like we invented the slasher. Even I don't know how. I'm sure there's other countries, but I know that we predate. I know that Halloween is John Carpenter being like the Christmas. Oh my,
Black
Christmas.
Christmas.
Like we should do another holiday one where he kills a bunch of people, and then he made how I don't know.
Also remade.
Texas.
Yeah, I
Yes.
saw both.
Thrice remade actually. The Black Christmas has been remade 3 times now.
Wow.
And it is a diminishing return experience, I will tell
Yeah,
you.
that's what I've heard.
Unfortunately, the new one, I appreciate the path it's trying to blaze. I will never take down a film because it's trying to do something different. But that doesn't always mean that the output is necessarily so maybe just change the title. Like Rob Zombie's Halloween is a good example. If you wouldn't have called it Rob Zombie's Halloween, just call it Rob Zombie Slasher Movie or whatever. There's a creative team that could probably think of a better name than that. But take out Michael
Rob
Myers.
Zombie's Easter.
Yeah, it's a great movie if you just take out Michael Myers, because it's Rob Zombie through and through. But the fact that it owes this to Halloween and to John Carpenter makes it somehow an inferior product. But what are some like sleeper hits and filmmakers that people should be thinking about? Because I can tell you, I have a few, but I want to hear from you all. What are some ones that you want to call some attention to? So let's see, Susie.
I wanted to add though that this is a little known Canadian fact. If you say Cronenberg 3 times in a dark room facing a mirror, The Brood will start playing on your phone.
And James Woods calls you.
Oh, I hope not.
Yeah, please.
No, I'll pass.
So yeah, I spent some time writing down some Canadian movies that I've really, really loved over the years. And, the first one that pops into my mind is Ginger Snaps, Karen Walton written. Who doesn't love that? And you know what? All 3 of them are good. There's 3 Ginger Snaps. They're all good.
Yeah.
You didn't like them?
Just the first one.
You didn't like the other 2?
Oh, you know what? I'm going to get myself in trouble. Yes, they're all really good.
I love them. So that's Karen Walton. I know she's still working and writing. Her focus is not horror, I don't think, but classics. You got to see them. I'm just waiting for the day when somebody remakes one of those. That's going to be heartbreaking. Elsa Keffent right now is the writer behind Slacks, which is a horror comedy. Now it's doing the festival circuit, and so I don't know how easy it is to see.
It's on Shudder.
I did a thing with her. Is it on Shudder?
Mm-hmm. It picked up about a month ago. Or they picked it up and it got released about a month or a month and a half ago.
Oh, I don't know if it's on Canadian Shudder yet. but I will look for that then. But I did a gig with her, so I got to see it. So fantastic, up and coming screenwriter. I think she's got another one that's shooting soon. Karen Lamb, who just picked up all the awards for Curse of Willow Song, black and white, kind of a dark past, cursed young woman. Fantastic film. She's quite accomplished, though. She did Evangeline. She did, help me out here, Robert.
I don't know. Sorry.
But she's very accomplished. She just had one out a couple of years ago too. She's a fantastic woman just in general. She's like a lawyer now. She makes films, and she makes film every few years. And she's got something new coming out next year. Of course, I mentioned let me just look at my notes here. The Changeling, but is that considered a Canadian horror movie?
Well, I don't know.
I thought about that. Maybe. Robert, what's your take on that?
And a lot of time recently with the set designer of The Changeling, and it seemed very Canadian from the way you described it.
Well, and it looks Canadian, right?
Yeah,
it really looks Canadian.
Wasn't Garth Drabinsky somehow involved in
He probably gave them money.
And he's just Canadian. He's in the clink right now, but
I know you totally claim it. Like whenever I lived in New York for a while, and whenever somebody would talk about anything Canadians, one of us would go, "Oh, that's Canadian,"
Yeah, that's.
And
he's a producer.
He's the producer. Okay.
Drabinsky, see there.
Well, he's one of. There's two producers. He's one of them.
That makes it pretty Canadian.
But the director, composer were not. George C. Scott.
Peter Medak directed that movie. He's like the British guy who made the Peter Sellers.
He's amazing, yeah.
Okay, the most Canadian thing we've done on this whole podcast is this discussion where we've we've gone through this. Is this Canadian? And of course, the fantastic filmmakers behind Blood Quantum. Do you guys see it?
Haven't seen that one yet.
Zombie movie. You guys got to watch it.
I will.
But they also swept the awards season. I saw it as soon as it came out. I'd been waiting for it for a while because, of course, it's a zombie movie. And they did something fantastic. I don't know if you know, Matt, what blood quantum is. It's a ratio of Indigenous blood versus non-Indigenous blood. And I
started watching it, and I started the first 5 minutes, and I saw the Indigenous angle, but I had to walk away for some reason. I didn't even came back to it, but that kind of makes sense what that means, because there is a heavy. It's like they talk about the Indigenous aspect right at the start of the movie. Or at least the main character's Indigenous, or one of them is.
They all are. Well, okay. I'm not going to spoil anything then, because none of you guys have seen it, so I won't spoil anything. But the blood quantum factors in, and I know that I believe that's an offensive and ancient reckoning, that blood quantum thing. I don't think that's used anymore, but it's used very effectively in this film. So those filmmakers are to be watched. They got the cover of Fangoria, didn't they? Or was it Fangoria or Rue Morgue?
I think it's Rue
Morgue.
Which Rue Morgue, I think, is a Canadian production, isn't it?
Yes, a Canadian horror magazine is fantastic. It
is really great.
I've been a long-term subscriber.
The editor of that magazine has directed one movie once that was pretty cool. I forget the name of it though. Really
she has a podcast too. I think the Faculty of Horror is
I love the Faculty of Horror.
I was going to bring that up later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I want to go back to film school and have deep conversations about film, but no one else. But it's one-sided. They're telling me stuff. I'd listen to the Faculty of Horror. Yeah. It's the most thought out podcast about horror films I've ever listened to. So big shout out to them. Great work they do.
It's so wonderful how they do themes too. But anyway, that's my list.
I love Ginger Snaps is I think probably the best werewolf film for me of all time. I know American Werewolf London is up there on people's list, The Howling, but none of them really tap into a deeper theme than the Ginger Snaps does. The Howling has some of that. It kind of teeters on this notion of what it really means to be free. And American Werewolf in London is all about being a foreigner in a foreign place doing, American things. But it never goes beyond that. Whereas Ginger Snaps really is this wonderful metaphor for puberty, and specifically women going through puberty. And even if you're not catching on that, you can still enjoy that movie thoroughly. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it's a great film.
So James and or Kelly, who wants to start with some recommendations?
Well, Ginger Snaps.
You want to double down on Ginger Snaps?
I'm so glad I went first.
I know, but I mean, it came out at a really great time for me. What was like 2001, 2000?
Yeah,
Anyway,
right.
Perfect age for you.
Perfect age for me, who got her period like next year or like around that time. So I was like, oh my God,
I'm a werewolf.
What's going to happen to me? And just like goth as fuck in like a really cool way. I thought like Catherine Isabel was the like most beautiful, coolest person on earth. I was like, wow, what an icon, aspirational. It's really like formed part of my like tween self for sure. Absolutely. Around that time, for some reason, not a horror movie, but that movie and the movie 13 were like two of my obsessions around that time, which is like a really horrible combination for like a young woman coming of age. Like I'm not all there, I'm sure, for those reasons. Aside from that, I mean, I was gonna bring up the Brandon Cronenberg Possessor just because like
Don't do it. You can't do it. We can't talk about Cronenberg.
I'm sorry, but it's very
it's okay. Rules meant to be broken.
Well, that was the perfect thing of a movie I wanted to hate for just full jealousy, like nepotism reasons. Like whatever, some body horror movie by his son.
Yeah, exactly.
It was so good. I was.
Yeah, like I can hold a grudge, but I loved it.
Yeah. I'm glad it's not just me that thinks that.
No, I know. It was the perfect. That's how good the movie was. It overcame everyone who went into that movie with that.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Those notions.
This is someone to look out for. I don't know if anyone's seen this yet. Dead Dicks.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a colleague of mine, Lee, who is fantastic, and her husband Chris. And that, like, I think they won the audience award or something at Fantasia 2 years ago, 2019 maybe. And they were working on something else. I asked her, I like messaged her, I was like, wait, are you guys working on anything else so I can plug it? And they are. It's called Red Acres, and that's all the info I have. But they have more stuff in production, and it's just really well received and like kind of a sensation. So I'm like very proud and happy for them. And that's something you should definitely watch. That's my rec. Hot rec for the moment.
So fast. I'll go so fast. Okay, really quickly. Everyone talks about it. And it's not anything new, but Deranged, the Confessions of a Necrophile movie. Great time.
So good.
But that one is the best because this is my other thing of like 8 months before Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 8 months before, everyone remember, filmed in Oshawa, Ontario. Don't forget. But the gore in that movie is really cool because it's like really heavy, but it's very understated the way they play it, which I like.
Terrifying. Absolutely it's a terrifying movie.
So this is one of my favorite tricks of the movie. The co-director of that movie is named Jeff Gillen, but he acts in a lot of stuff, and he's the Santa in A Christmas Story. I love that fact. Scariest Santa of all time. Yeah, exactly.
Disturbing, truly.
And it's written by Alan Ormsby, who wrote one of the great CanCon horror movies, Death Dream or Dead of Night, whatever you want to. But just the clique of Bob Clark, I don't know. I like that whole world. It's very versatile, really fast. Pin, Plastic Nightmare. Everyone loves that movie. Great, super weird, incredible. I love the idea of showing that to someone. Be like, if you want to understand the repression of a Canadian identity, you should watch Pin. It's so weird. I don't know. I mean, the one that I want to talk about the most, I don't even know if it's a horror movie, but I love it so much, specifically from the perspective of Canadian movies. You call it a psychological thriller, I guess, but the movie I Love a Man in Uniform, everyone says it's like a 90s movie.
Yeah, Peter, what's the director's name?
David Wellington.
Oh, David Wellington. His brother's Peter Wellington. I think he wrote it, but that was good. Yeah, I forgot.
It's cool. Some genius on the internet called it Hoser Core. But it's really like I always for years referred to people as a Canadian taxi driver. I was just like, it's the best. But like in this one, it's like the whole thing is he's a cop where he's an actor who's acting as a cop in some bad Canadian television show, and he wears the uniform out at lunch once, and he like gets a little taste of it. He's like, oh my God, some of the kids are scared of me. And then he just starts walking around in the uniform. But the best thing about it is that he's like bullied. He like never has authority. It's like if like Travis Bickle shaved his head into a mohawk and then like bought all those guns and then was just berated by Harvey Keitel and went home, like he didn't do anything. And it's like this incredible Canadian thing of like, he's on the edge of full psychosis the whole movie, but he never fully explodes. The movie kind of loses sense of reality, but he still collects himself at the end, which is a crucial thing to me about Canadian identity. And also a thing that Kids in the Hall are really good at in general, like portraying the thing of like, oh, and they're like, oh my goodness, Peter, I went too far. whatever that thing is. And yeah, I don't know. I just love it. And it just ends very unabruptly. And it's just like, the score is by Tragically Hip. It's just so Canadian. It's a very, but I love that movie and the star, I forget his name, but he's in so many things. He was in that movie Room, and he's in a lot of Bruce McDonald movies and stuff. Anyways, I love that movie. But new movies, really quickly, like Kelly, The Friends, Brook Street Pictures in Ottawa do fun stuff. Astron 6 are the guys who did that movie, The Editor, and a few of those things.
That's
Canadian.
the Giallo one, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're just like fun Canadian.
Yeah, it was good.
Fun Canadian boys.
What
Like
about Lee DeMarb?
Lee DeMarb is someone in Ottawa who was very kind to us, along with the directors of Dead Dicks, who in Ottawa, he directed the movie, a really independent movie called Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter, which he was very early on when I was like, we were going to make this movie. And he was just like, you just got to pick a good title. Like, honestly, like, the movie can be horrible. If it has a good title, you'll at least be able to get money and make another one. And then we did not do that well. We made the horrible mistake of picking a title afterwards, which is, why would we do that? We just spent months just like arguing. I wanted to call it Piss on Your Grave for so long. Yeah. Horrible title in retrospect.
Good title.
And I like, but Lee DeMarb keeps making stuff, and in Ottawa he's really supportive. He runs the Mayfair. So
and
check out what
Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter was a big like Ottawa cult kind of hit, like midnight movie style. For a lot of
in the way around the same time that really Tom Green was on public access, there was like this thing where we're just like, oh my god, Ottawa's like so weird right now. There's like and Vincenzo Nitelli, he's Canadian. I like growing up. That's by the way a perfect example of a movie that's like, I would say Cube is a Canadian movie, correct? Okay,
I think so.
To make sure we pass the bar. That's a movie that's like in a cube in space, but I look at it and I'm like, this cube is in Canada. This is my I like as a director. I don't know. He's also
that's total theater of the mind, right? Like it's so.
Yeah.
He used his low budget as a superpower.
Yeah, he did another movie like that called Nothing that was on the TBS or on the movie station growing up a lot, but it was like another Canadian movie that was just another exact same like genius low budget conceit of just like two guys leave their house and it just end expansive blankness. And they're like, what happened? And so trying to figure out how nothing is there.
And all the Saw sequels are basically ripping off of Cube. I mean, the entire premise, I think, of the second Saw movie is the exact same premise of Cube, except there's no like jigsaw. It's just that everyone's there for a reason, and they all have their purpose, but you don't know what that purpose is yet. And I think they did that in Escape Room as well, which is pretty much just a rip of Cube as well. So Robert, what are some?
Does the thing that Robert talks about, really, like with Jaws thing, of just like you see someone get chopped into cubes at the beginning, and then nothing really that hardcore for the rest of the movie. You're just so scared they're all gonna get chopped into cubes at any second. It's great.
Yeah,
it's like the opening of Jaws. All you need to see is the first swim scene, and the whole movie you're like, oh Jesus Christ, I know what happens in the ocean.
It's wet and dark and scary.
Yes, don't like
cold.
So Robert, what are some sleeper underground or hidden gem or just some filmmakers and films you want to draw some attention to?
There's this up and comer. His name's David Cronenberg. No,
never heard of him.
I've never met either of these people, but one is Adam McDonald, who did Backcountry, which I liked. But what I loved was his other film called Pyewacket. Anyone seen that?
Pyewacket.
It's been a while since I've seen that one. I didn't even watch that.
Oh yeah, so you've seen it. Okay,
yes, cool. It's been a long time.
So to me, it epitomized, like, I don't know what his budget situation is. I get pretty snobby if I see something and I find out it took 40 days to shoot. I just get really snobby because it's like anyone can do that. Assuming it was small, and he just knew his limitations, and his use of special effects was very minimal and subtle, and loved it. The other one is a zombie movie called It Stains the Sand Red. That I want to say it's Colin Minahan. I've never met the dude. I think he's Toronto, but this is again very Canadian. So he wants to do zombies. He has the wisdom to not. Again, I don't know his budget, but he has the wisdom to not go, okay, there's going to be 50 of them cresting that hill. No, it's about one zombie chasing one woman across the desert. And I just thought that's fantastic. And it's done really well. And check it out. Like, again, I don't know what the money, definitely under $1 million. And he just uses the money very judiciously and not too gory, but gory enough to, feed the fans that love that sort of thing. And I think he's done more too, although I can't say what they are. But yeah,
Really
I whack it.
he really scored with that casting in It Stains the Sand Red. She was fantastic.
So that's the zombie is Agum's husband. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Agam Darshi, who's in Bright Hill Road, she plays the innkeeper. She's her husband was the zombie, and I didn't even know till I'd seen the movie 3 times. But it was so low budget that he'd wake up in his zombie makeup and go get a Slurpee. Like that right there tells me that it was pretty low. You know what I mean? But I'm just full of admiration. Again, I don't know if it made any profits, but I just really dug it.
Yeah, it was a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
We should probably Danushka Esterhazy too, right? Like she's really making some noise. Am I saying her name right?
Danishka?
Danishka Esterhazy.
I don't actually know what she's doing.
Well, she did Level 16 and she did that Banana Splits movie, which I didn't see.
You did or didn't?
What's that?
You did not see? I haven't seen it.
No.
I know she's a very kind woman. It's good, yeah.
It's fun. It's because I say fun because you're either going to buy it or you don't buy it. But if you've ever wanted to see if you ever looked at one of those performing like circus bear, like animatronic things at one of those pizza places and been like, I could totally see how this could be a horror movie. They totally deliver on that. And it handles it with the right amount of self-awareness that it knows how silly it is, but it totally leans into the horror in a way that it's not scary, but you're surprised at how far it goes to deliver exactly what you don't think it will. So it's well worth a rent or a buy.
Well, I know she's had a long
terrified of animatronic like Chuck E. Cheese or any of these things. She's losing her mind right now. Thinking of it.
So funny.
Yeah, it's scary stuff.
It's fun. They pulled it off. I will say that it's really hard to turn that into a horror movie. I think and have it be both serious and tongue in cheek. And I think they did a good job. If it's going to traumatize, that's the way I'm with clowns. My last movie I watched last night to prepare for this was The Clown at Midnight, which I actually spoke to James Duval, my first interview ever, and the movie was good. Have you ever seen a movie called Popcorn? It's basically the same plot, just face a clown with the guy from Popcorn, but which Popcorn is one of my favorite movies of all time. It delivers on all the goods. But I watched some interesting ones to prepare for this, and I'm glad no one mentioned the ones that I'm about to mention because I tried to dig really deep. And the first one I'm going to mention, I'm not going to call it a good movie because that's not what it is. It is an insane bonkers. Well, not insane. It is a bonkers movie, and it's called The Carpenter from 1988, and it's got Wings Hauser in it. And
yes,
the premise of
the director
movie,
of I Love a Man in Uniform, same director.
Is that the same director? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sell it with just this one point. There is a part very early on where someone gets both of their arms cut off and they do not scream. And there is so much depravity that is handled with such lightness that you can't watch. It's like an Italian movie in the sense that you can't believe what you're seeing, but at the same time you don't want to look away, and none of it's redeemable, but all of it is purely entertaining. And it's on Amazon Prime, so you can watch it now. I hope people get paid for Amazon Prime watches, because I will literally watch that on repeat just so Wings Hauser and the director can get some, a fraction of a cent. But you will be entertained. It's not a movie you're going to say, wow, that should win an award, but you will be entertained.
Cool.
Curtains. Has anyone seen Curtains?
Never.
No.
I very rare. It's like is on the list whenever I read like weather, environment, Canadian horror movies, but I've never seen it. I've always wanted to.
I think Curtains has probably the most terrifying stalking scene that happens in daylight. And it's the most famous scene in the movie where, the woman's on ice skates and she's being chased, but that happens in broad daylight. And it's absolutely, and it doesn't go the way you think it does. Like, it's not like a slasher in the sense that like this person's superhuman, but it's very rare that a slasher movie will actually keep you guessing and the ending actually surprises you. And even though, again, with any slasher movie, you have to take a bit of a leap to assume that all of this happens. But at the same time, they do a really good job of putting it all together. I did watch. I'm going to name a couple that I thought were good, but also I think good. Like I think it's okay to make a good movie. I'm just going to say that. I think it's okay to make a movie that you can watch, enjoy. You may not remember it, but you can always go back and you're like, wow, okay, that was worth the 90 minutes I spent. 90 minutes. She Never Died. There was
I saw that.
So, that's a good one.
So I didn't like the first one, He Never Died, the Henry Rollins one. I thought it was a bit, maybe it's Henry Rollins. I like him as a person, but I think he's got the emotional range of cardboard. So I just don't think he could pull off trying to, elicit any emotion. But She Never Died kind of takes the concept and goes a little bit further with it. And it's really well done. I think Aubrey Cummings is her name. Audrey Cummings.
She's great.
Yeah, she is. And I watched another one of hers, Berkshire County, which was, a little mean. It was very mean-spirited. I will say that, but at the same time, I think it delivers in a lot of ways. Whether you want the gore or you want something that kind of makes you retch a little bit inside because you hate because you realize how bad human beings are. And then some other ones that I didn't realize. So Visiting Hours with Michael Ironside.
Yes. I didn't know that either.
No, I didn't either.
Canadian.
I didn't know.
It was it's Canadian produced and directed film. Rituals from 1977, which is again kind of one of those Deliverance offshoots, but it pulls a Full Metal Jacket on you, which is it totally changes its tone, like the last third of the film. And then Graveyard Shift, but not the Stephen King adaptation. The one that was called The Central Park Drifter is probably one of the most creative vampire movies that no one's ever seen. It was a video store staple because I guarantee if you see the cover art, it's just those fangs over New York City, a guy vampire fangs. But and I never rented it. It was the one I always pass by. I'm like, maybe I'll maybe I'll watch that another time. But it's a pretty good. It is not going to blow anyone's doors off, but it takes some leaps with the vampire genre. And I think if you're gonna go big, go big.
What's that title again? That one.
So Graveyard Shift, but it also has another name of Central Park Drifter, which I think I don't know what the release was of where it goes. And there are a few that I didn't get to watch, but that are on my list. There's Ravenous, but I think it was, I'm not going to say this correctly in French, but Les Femmes.
Yeah, my dad's a big fan of that
Not to put Jim Hercom on blast again, but
huge fan of Ravenous. So I read that was quite good. I haven't watched it yet, and so getting to that. And then another one was The Dark Hours, which I think I could only watch on YouTube. I can't even get a DVD of it here.
It's a good one.
It's worth it. Okay, because I will import DVDs just to have
it's got some really good. The guy, I don't know him, but he went off to do TV, and I remember thinking, I wish you'd do another horror movie. It was good.
Yeah, I try to be very careful when I was picking some because I wanted to make sure I was okay, that's I think some people say some things are good, but ultimately I don't want to read reviews. I just want to kind of feel does the premise catch me? If it does, I'll watch it. And then the same was with 5150 Elms Way. I also heard that was really, really. I think the French name is 5150 Rue des Ormes. Yes. So again, haven't seen it. I was only able to find it on YouTube without having to buy a DVD. So. Those are some other ones that for anyone watching this, wanting some other recommendations, you can find those usually on streaming services. But I also wrote down some notes from you also. Thank you for those. And moving on from just film for a moment, what are some other art, horror art? Susie, you're a writer, so we obviously want to hear more about some things you want to recommend to us from the literary world. But aside from film, what are some other horror or horror related arts that are uniquely Canadian, or that things that even stores or kind of art that's coming from out, like Jason Edmiston, I'll use it as an example, who's an artist who has become quite popular as of late, although he's kind of if you don't really run in the alternative movie poster world, then you may not have heard his name, but he's fantastic. And if you've ever picked up a NECA toy, he's done half of their box art. But what are some other artists that we should be paying attention to?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because a friend of mine, or I guess a colleague, Greg Chomachuk, is a graphic designer, graphic artist, and he does graphic novels. And we've been trying to find something to do together forever because we're lovers of horror. But he's got a number of graphic novels out there. I've even blurbed on a couple of them. And I do love a graphic novel. So look out for Chamachuk. He got a big contract with a Japanese company to do the art for, you know what? I don't know them, but they're a made up a graphic novel series about a punk band that I think they're all either superhuman or vampires. It's a Japanese product, so I don't know it. But yeah.
That sounds so Japanese for some reason though, like a punk rock vampire band. Like it sounds.
Yeah.
And vampires, yes.
Oh, that sounds wonderful and in the best way possible.
Exactly.
Any other artists or authors?
Yeah, I have. Oh, go ahead.
No, we were gonna really blend. Like
Okay.
just go, please.
I have 4. One is Cuff, no relation to me. The Calgary Underground Film Festival, just because they bring in the coolest shit, shorts and features. Yeah. Another is a Toronto festival that's not quite as well known as Toronto After Dark, but it's called Blood in the Snow. These guys just live and breathe horror, and they're nerds like all of us. And I don't know if they make money doing it, but their heart and soul is into it. And the other one is Faculty of Horror, which you've mentioned, Matt, which is I've been a filmmaker forever, and these 2 women make me feel really dumb. But also not in a talking down way, just like, oh fuck, why didn't I think of that? That's true. Oh, you idiot. Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Very informative. And the other is Rue Morgue, which is kind of, I would say, Canada's Fangoria. Sorry, did I take someone else's? And it's not just Canadian horror whatsoever. And it's
I love it.
Certainly not because they gave Susie and I a great review.
Hey, they were very kind to us too.
Awesome.
Oh, Rue Morgue, our lives.
Yeah.
There you go. But desperately need people to subscribe.
Yes.
And their print editions are pretty freaking beautiful, like high gloss.
They are.
Cardstock. It's layout's beautiful. And I think one of them actually co-hosts, I'm sorry, I don't know her name, the Faculty of Horror. I think the editor of Rue Morgue.
One's a professor and the other one's the editor of Rue Morgue. I just don't know the names for both.
If you said her name, I would know it. But yeah, very smart women that love horror. And
Andrea Sebasati.
Subasati, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, when I listen to their podcast, it is one of those, like, not only did not think of that, but I also want to contribute. Like, I want to like get involved in that conversation because of how deep they go into the theory and the metaphor and the underlying themes of horror. And they don't just talk about big horror movies, but they also take big horror movies and they talk about them in ways that they're not usually talked about. You just talk about, is it good? Is it bad? Is there a lot of kills?
Totally. Like, they made me rethink how I think of Texas Chainsaw by just putting it in that period of history, just post-Vietnam. And it was really, so many horror movies just get, it's a horror movie. But, many of them have deep subtext, and that Tobe Hooper was no exception, for sure.
No. And some people there's the argument that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is actually a comedy. So
this is my conversation I have all the time with everybody, always. I'm just like, I mean, come on, the grandpa, though, at least. It's funny, right? It's funny.
It is. And I think I think it's easy to laugh at it now because you're either going to laugh at it because, like, oh, that's so silly, or you were like, that's so absurd. And the whole idea that Leatherface is basically this, like, undeveloped or underdeveloped, like, little boy who's, like, in this massive, giant, hulking body. And he's basically just frightened the entire time. Like, it makes you look at the film in a very different way. And if you haven't seen the documentary of the making of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the old one, that just is old clips pieced together, it's not only highly entertaining, but of all the sets I never want to ever have to be on in my entire life, that is the one. Shooting that like, end scene, that dinner scene, like, never want to be a part of that.
So hot and
like
so bad.
Kelly and James, you guys mentioned the smells. I've heard the smells of Texas Chainsaw, rotting chicken carcasses. Not just as a vegetarian, but I speak for all of humanity. That's just disgusting.
The dinner scene was shot during the day. They had to black out all the windows, and it was like 110 degrees outside, so it was like 130 inside. and all of that's shot for 27 hours. So all that meat and stuff was just sitting there baking. And I think there's a scene where like someone does like throw up, and like that's real, like, or you know, that's all that's real.
You know,
Also, don't get me wrong. I'm not like a cold, but I find that movie very scary. It's the father and the grandfather. I find their relationship with the family really funny, and also why I really feel bad for Leatherface. You're like, Jesus Christ, he has no choice here.
Exactly. He didn't have a chance.
You lunkhead. You just, I mean, the whole thing is just, it is, and Toby Hooper knew that. That's what he did in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. He's like, you guys didn't get the joke, so I'm going to make it more obvious. And I'm going to lay it in real thick. I do want to
always laugh when he pokes when the old guy pokes the bag in the back of the car. He's like, I'm like, how happy he is.
Feeding Grandpa. I mean, it can be seen as horrific and also being hilarious because, you know, Grandpa is if alive, barely. There are a couple artists I want to give a couple shout outs to as well. I collect a lot of art prints, and I love alternative movie posters. I think it's the best thing that's ever happened to the poster world, because now we just don't get floating heads. We get people's interpretations of film through their art. But Gary Pullen, or Ghoulish Gary Pullen as he's sometimes referred to, has done some amazing art for a lot of great properties, including Creepshow, Phantasm. And also a guy named Matt Ryan Tobin, who has done some of the best posters for films like The Crow. One of my personal favorites is his Silver Bullet poster, which is again a great werewolf film, with a very flawed werewolf film, but a good one nonetheless. And he's also a big Bill and Ted fan, so if you like Bill and Ted, he's done some really great tributes to those films as well. But some amazing art coming out of Canada, not just in the film world, but also other places. And I appreciate you all sharing those.
Oh, I had a book rec.
Yes.
A book I haven't read, but I forgot about now. I was doing research. I was like, oh my God, how have I not read this yet? By Kira Lajeunesse, who, I don't know if she's from Montreal, but she lived here for a very long time and was one of the co-owners of this like screening group and theater called Blue Sunshine that screened like exploitation and like really rare films and a lot of horror stuff. And she wrote a book called House of Psychotic Women, I believe it's called. It's all about like women losing their minds on screen, like why we're so fascinated by that in specifically horror and exploitation movies. And she released a film, I believe it's a documentary last year that was at South by Southwest at the very least, that apparently was very good, that I have not seen either. But it's called Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched, and it's about like folk horror.
Just premiered at Venice, or the Venice film.
Really?
I think it just premiered because no, I take that back. It's premiering at the Tennessee Film Festival, Chattanooga Film Festival, maybe what it is. But I think it's online. I'm not sure if it was this past weekend or it's coming up. But if it already happened, I missed it. But it's the one that's the documentary about folk horror, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you tell me the title again? I didn't catch what you said.
The documentary is called Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched.
And Severin Films is actually going to be putting that out, I think, later this year. I think David Gregory, the guy behind Severin, I think helped produce it, or I know it was something that they helped put together, along with another one they did on anthologies, which if you really, so my junk food is horror movie documentaries, anything about the making of or the explaining of, but Tales of the Uncanny is all about anthology, like a history of anthology horror films. I guarantee you want to keep a notepad out when you watch this, because you will be taking down a lot of recommendations of movies and anthologies you haven't even heard of. And they go way back, like, you know, pre-1950 into like some anthology films. So by all means, find this.
Yeah, that's cool.
The sad truth is, like, I just wish Shudder would just exclusively now only make just horror documentaries. I could watch so many of them, and they're so fun. I don't know why. I guess that they're independent. It's fun to watch independent.
Well,
so, Canadian artists. If you're in Canada, if you watched TV in 1990 as a child, are you submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society?
Oh yeah.
Are You Afraid of the Dark? Was on Nickelodeon in America, but it's a very Canadian show. It's filmed in BC, and it's all like Jay Baruchel and Alicia Cuthbert and all these Canadian people.
I did not know it was made in Canada.
It was a white.
I love that show.
Yeah, so good.
I have a bootleg copy of all the episodes on Blu-ray because you can't buy them anywhere. And
I found the DVD at Zeller's, if you know what that is. Rest in peace. I think it is no more in Canada. It was our Walmart for a long time.
And it's funny. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention a novel that I read last year that I really, really liked and really, really sort of blew my mind by Mona Awad, called Bunny. Did anybody read that book? Robert's wife may have, because I recommended it so hard to Tanya, because it's batshit crazy, and it all takes place in a university setting. It's really, which is a setting that always has fascinated me for horror. I've written a number of stories that take place on university campuses, and yeah, so Mona Awad's Bunny. Seriously.
And speaking of Jay Baruchel, I did watch the Random Acts of Violence that he has on Shudder.
We were just talking about this yesterday.
We
haven't seen it yet, but
What did you think? We haven't seen it yet. Very curious.
I liked it. It doesn't stick the landing, but I think it's hard to stick the landing sometimes. Like, I don't take away from a movie if it can't always stick the landing. I think it can be a little difficult. But I think what he sets up, first of all, he does it in 81 minutes, which I think is beautiful. Like, I forget who said it, but like the first 90, like you get the first 90 minutes for free. After that, you got to earn it. I think there's some truth to that, because the older I get, the less time I have, and the more I appreciate tight storytelling. Which, in fact, Joe Bob Briggs said about Ginger Snaps, to bring this back to that for a second. He said that is the best. He said that is the tightest horror movie script ever written. Just the pace of things that happen, the way that it all kind of flows. Like, there's not a boring moment, and high praise for it for sure. But 81 minutes long, it's basically like an extended TV movie, and extremely well done. I mean, Jay Baruchel obviously has a huge love for the genre, and I think you can see that in what he's doing. It gets a lot of there's some negativity online. I don't understand that, to be honest. I think horror fans sometimes have a sense of entitlement around things that they don't know what they want, and so when they don't see what they want, even though they didn't know they didn't want, like, even though they didn't know what they wanted, they just are mad. Like, oh, it didn't do this. It's like, okay, but were you entertained?
You're telling us.
No, we were really nervous when the movie was coming out. We're like, please just call it a thriller. Just stop saying horror, please. And they're like, no, it's a horror movie. Call it a horror movie. And I was like, no, they're gonna fucking be so mad.
Yeah.
Just please don't call it a horror movie. But no, did you see what was the Jay Baruchel, that Jacob Tierney directed? That was in Montreal.
Yeah,
Good Neighbors.
that was that was very
the weirdest
good.
movie.
He's a friend of mine. That was super tight.
Which one was it?
Something that I did not
called Good
expect. I was like,
Neighbors.
this movie's crazy.
And it's a
So
really
good.
specific,
I liked it.
in terms of
Montreal.
Canadian identity stuff, it's a
Yeah.
really specific thing,
Yeah.
like
Canadian,
Anglophones
yeah.
in an English community in Montreal.
Yeah.
And it justifies the thing of maybe why there could be someone who could get away with something very easily. I mean, it happened in English Montreal with Luca Magnotta. He was just like a dude walking around openly, and he was just invisible to people who could be like, some English guy talking English at me.
Yeah. That's true. We can get away with anything.
No, I mean, that's not. We could murder people and no one would even know unless they watch this.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, is this recording? Oh goodness.
No, it's cool. It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
Satire.
Definitely worth a watch. A weird one.
Yeah, it is weird.
But I think that's I said this to Robert when I did the interview with Susie, Robert, and Colin for Bright Hill Road. I said, horror fans will watch 85 minutes of nothing to get to 5 minutes of amazing. Like, as long as you deliver something that people remember it by, then that's all you have to do. And so in one way, they can be the most harsh critics of things because it didn't deliver on an unknown expectation. But at the same time, you'd be completely flabbergasted by the things that they fawn over because of one scene. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Italian horror movies, again, because I love them. I think they're amazing, but they are not amazing because of their quality. They're amazing because of their audacity. They have the audacity to take, pretty much every franchise, slap a different name on it, and then call it something totally different. And it somehow becomes its own thing. And I think, when it comes to horror films in general, it is the most accepting audience of people who will watch anything you put in front of them. But at the same time, that's what the whole point of getting this together is how can we get more people to watch things that do deserve to be watched? And how can we bring more attention to filmmakers that are putting out not only something that's different, but something that deserves our attention and our eyes, our dollars. Now that theaters are reopening, I recently saw a Quiet Place 2 in the theater. And if you get a chance to see it in the theater if you can.
Yeah.
But there's something special to that. And I want to end on a final question for all of you, which is, what is the best way for anyone, regardless of location, to support Canadian horror? Are there places we can buy things from? Are there sites we can visit to learn about what filmmakers are doing, or just, we have some names to pay attention to, which I'm going to go through this and transcribe a lot of the names so I can get them down and share them. But I'll kind of start again, Robert, Susie, and then end with James and Kelly. Like, what are some ways we can support Canadian horror and Canadian horror filmmakers?
I would say pirate Justice League. Don't pirate indie horror.
Yes.
Because we ain't got any money. It's and I'm not bitching at all. Like the Bright Hill was the smallest thing I've ever done, but it was so satisfying, and I think it might even be because of how small it was. Like a 10-person crew was just wonderful. I knew everyone's name, and we all slept at that hotel. But and I kind of get that from yours too. Like it seemed like it seemed like a cabal of people just kind of having fun. I don't know if that's the case or not, but that's...
No money.
No money.
Oh yeah, I took that for granted just because.
I don't know if you can tell,
but I don't think it's held either of our movies back. Susie, what do you think?
I completely agree. I think that one good way to keep up with all horror is to follow all those sites and listen to those podcasts. I do. And, I follow everybody on Twitter and Instagram. And you know what? Rue Morgue, which is Canadian, it covers everything, including gaming, art. There's a woman in here who does a recipe every month called Deadly Diets or something. And and film and music. Like they are everything horror, and they have a website, and it's a great website. So you can get a lot of this stuff for free.
Yeah.
Fangoria is also pretty supportive of Canadian horror, and always has been. And again, a really good website. So and if you Google Canadian horror, you're going to get all the standard ones. So don't start there. Start with Rue Morgue or smaller websites.
Yeah, get to the 5th page of search results, like go beyond the suggestion and start getting into the depths of where the good stuff lies.
Absolutely.
Those are the most satisfying, right? The ones that the ones that you found, like that's what I miss about video store era. It's just, you miss that opportunity to just judge something by its cover.
Yeah. Also, you're stuck with it. You have to finish it. You're like, I paid money for this.
Yeah. And it's due. I still have 2 days with it. All right, I'm going to finish it. And some of the best, two of my favorite horror movies I found because of the cover art, and they just happened to deliver. Waxwork and Popcorn. They both are just pure entertainment. And had I not picked up that box, or had I looked up Letterboxd before, I'm not sure I would have got there. So, James and Kelly, what are some ways that we can continue to support Canadian horror in all regards?
I say, I'm actually in the States, maybe they still have it, but they got rid of it came from the North section in Shudder. Bring that back, because it's a perfect place for new Canadian. That's where I was planning on watching Backcountry for so long. I put off, but now I don't have a chance. I have to find it somewhere else. Obviously, just pay for it. But also, if you're in Ottawa, go to the Mayfair. It's like the oldest theater in Ottawa. The guy who runs it is great, and they play a lot of horror movies.
The guy who runs it is
Lee DeMarb.
Yeah,
and also doing the Lord's work in Toronto is Unobstructed View, which I love, because for Canadians, it's really expensive to get all the things that are behind Matt, which is to say like Vinegar Syndrome or Severin or any of these like boutique Blu-ray labels. To import them, we have to pay a lot of fees, and also just sucks. Unobstructed View is they import a lot of Vinegar Syndrome and Arrow and Criterion stuff. So if you're in Canada and you want Blu-rays, buy them from them. I love them so much, and they've been really nice. And to my demanding miss things I ordered improperly and accepted returns. Great people out in Unobstructed View.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I'd never heard of that.
Yeah, it's great. Hot Wreck. It's really, I don't know, it's great. It made me so happy. This is fairly new, I think 2 years ago, but it used to be this thing where I'd wait every year for these companies to put out sales, and that's the only way I could ever really justify buying a thing that I will honestly hide somewhere in my house. So it's like I don't know. I love these companies. Let's import these. There's not a lot of, I can't think of a Canadian boutique home video label that exists. There's so many in the States, but I was trying to recommend one. But You got one for
There,
us?
I think I might actually. I just connected with someone, and I usually never pull out my phone when I'm.
Do you get all those? Do you get a bunch of movies for free? This is my
Absolutely
question.
not.
Always.
Absolutely not. I don't get paid for
I was
any of this.
wondering.
Like all of my pay. Well, not all my paycheck, but like I work a shitty. I don't have a shitty job. I'm just gonna say, I work a job that I doing something I don't absolutely love.
What's the name of the company and the address for the?
They're too big, and I think I'm hoping not to stand out in a crowd of 18,000 people. But there is. I saw Black Fawn Distribution. I recently connected with. I don't. Okay. I don't know if they're distributors as much of imported films, but they do seem to distribute a lot of Canadian films, Canadian horror films. So again, definitely check them out. And they're actually, I just connected with them 2 days ago. So I plan on reaching out to them this month and hopefully getting something on the board with them, just to at least talk and promote some things. Because now that Shudder has disbanded it came from the North section, I'm more than happy to carry the torch on the Macabre Daily site and just start promoting some Canadian picks. So is there any more suggestions anyone has?
Leave nice reviews on Letterboxd on all of our movies. Any Canadian horror movie you see, leave a nice little review. Or IMDb. IMDb is like absolute.
IMDb is the best.
It's brutal.
Of all the negative reviews, the
Go for it.
funniest have always been.
Yeah, it's true.
It makes me very happy. Like the
Also,
Very
Amazon,
creative.
someone left us a 1-star review before our movie came out and said something like, what a waste of a movie. I'm like, okay.
On Amazon, you
Yeah.
can't rate on Amazon.
It hadn't come out yet.
That's
So
hilarious.
we took their word for it. And
Don't you love people?
But yeah, I would say like leaving nice reviews, which is something I used to never really do. And then during COVID, I kind of got more into like the Letterboxd culture, a little bit of actually logging movies and leaving, even if they're really, really stupid reviews, which mine usually are, just like a few words. It's like sometimes it's a nice way to like discover new things or, you know, just bump up a movie's rating. So I'm assuming that's how we get more visibility. I don't know.
Yeah.
Among friends.
I
And all
think
that.
I reviewed yours.
Oh, I'm going to look at it
I think I
soon
did.
someday.
I think I did. Yeah. I did the same thing. I found that this is why I started reviewing on IMDb, because if the more you review, the more weight your opinion holds. And so what I want to do is review enough that I can go and review my own film, and then it will, shoot up to the top, those 9s and 10s.
Susie's trying to break the internet. Is what she's trying to do. She's trying to break IMDb down.
Absolutely.
I think that's amazing.
I recently.
So we're gonna rig the system for Canadian horror, Susie. You and me.
Yeah, really.
I'm changing the system.
I think as a lasting bit of inspiration from Letterboxd, I was having a hard time putting together a article I just put out on how do I get people enticed. How do I talk about suggesting movies without just saying it's a good movie? And I decided to take Letterboxd reviews and use those as a way to pitch the movie. And I think some of my favorites, which is, let me see if I can find. Have you ever seen Split Second? It's got Rutger Hauer in it. It's 1992. It's basically like a sci-fi like slasher movie where Rutger Hauer just chases some it's like an alien thing, but he's like a city underwater.
That describes all of his movies.
It's either him being chased or him chasing something, and just looking very stoic while doing it.
The cover, I remember this vividly from my childhood. This box art.
But the Letterboxd review is simple: a city underwater and a killer on the loose wades around in a B-movie yuck, but never commits enough to get its hair wet. And yet it's fun. Rutger is surprisingly funny, and the monster wears sunglasses.
Really good at these. Like it's their sweet spot of like tweet length little reviews. Some guy flowers was like dog pees on the guy, love it, or something. I don't know, something really silly.
Oh, no,
they're inspirational.
Yeah.
I mean, the Return of Swamp Thing. That was another one I put on this list of movies to watch, and the review from Letterboxd was perfect. It was first bullet. The LA dating scene is so rough that Heather Locklear fucks Swamp Thing like she didn't even think about it. The second bullet is, this is the level of over the top and camp that every comic book movie should be. And the third bullet is, put Swamp Thing in the Justice League, you cowards.
Nice.
I mean, if you didn't want to see Return of Swamp Thing after reading that, I'm not sure how you wouldn't want to. But I digress. I want to end by saying thank you all again so much for this, for the time, for the recommendations, for sharing your work with us, and also for the great films you've put out and the work you've put together, whether it be on literary form, whether it be on film. And I just hope that everyone watching this takes the time to go and look into all of you and your work, and continues to follow you so we can be aware of them. But I will certainly champion the work you continue to do and create, so that at the very least there's someone, me and the Letterboxd folks will be talking about it. So I want to thank you all again for this, and happy Canada Day.